Welcome to Addicted to Acting. This is my longtime friend and fellow addict, Mr. Michael Malvesti. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Gary. I appreciate it.
And in an attempt to be open, this is the second time we're recording it because the first time we recorded it, I lost it. So we're doing it again, and Mike is being very patient. But it's all worked out because since we recorded the original, which is somewhere in the digispace, Widow's Bay has been on fire, which Mike is a cast of. So we will get to that. So, Mike, let's start with the first question. Why are you addicted to acting?
Good question. I've always loved movies and television. Growing up, I loved watching movies and television. And I got I was obsessed when I was younger. 80s was a great time for movies. Back to the Future, Goonies, the Rocky movies, all the Indiana Jones, all that stuff. That's what got me into it. And I never thought that I could be in movies like that. Living on the East Coast, everything happened in Hollywood, right. New York. So, as I got older, I started to realize that it's a possibility because more things started filming in Boston, and I started, then I started to, have kind of a line into the business. Kind of heard about friends getting into it and stuff like that, and then once I heard the story of Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, how they came from Boston, and they worked their way up the ranks, and they weren't getting any roles, so they decided to write their own. And I'm not saying I'm on their level, but it just kind of brought to the forefront that, people from the West Coast, like including Mark and Donnie Wahlberg, that you can do it. You can go out there, and eventually you obviously can do it in Massachusetts too. So my main goal when I first started was I just wanted to be in a movie. It didn't matter what capacity. I just thought it would be cool. I started seeing all these movies filmed in Boston, and I said, I'd love to get in one of these, whether it was an extra, I didn't even think of having a speaking or starring role or anything like that. And then when I did finally get to be an extra in a movie, that is what lit the flame when I got to see what it was like to be in that whole process. And I just fell in love with it. And I realized it was something that, was possible if I worked hard, that anything was possible. So that's where my addiction started. And then once you get your foot in the door, because, Massachusetts is a completely different beast from New York and LA. It's a smaller market. Everybody knows everybody, at least back when I started, which was the late 90s, early 2000s. Everybody knew everybody. So if you could just put in the work and take the classes with the casting people, Carolyn Pickman, Angela Perry over at Boston Casting, Carolyn Pickman, CP Casting, at the time, Maura Tai.
Right. I remember.
Once you get in with those, take the classes with them, kind of make a name for yourself, show them you're dependable, you'll show up, they tell you to be there, you're there. That's when it kind of built, when I realized it was possible, and more things started to come here, that I just kept finding out what was coming, did what I could to try and get an audition, because the work is the audition. The getting a part in anything, that's just the icing on the cake. So I just, I would knock on doors. At that time, the internet wasn't anything that was huge. You weren't emailing people stuff. You were mailing hard copies. So like I said, once you got that first extra role, that's what set it off. And if I got, if I started to feel like I wasn't making any headway, something would happen that would light a fire under me. I'd see something or watch something, and it would just make me want to, oh, here it is again. Now, let's do another mailing. Let's do this. Let's take another one or two classes. And it got to a point where I had no desire to move to New York or LA, because I had a decent full-time job, and I had met my wife, and I'm like, if we can do it from here, great. And the fact that I could actually be in a movie or a TV show, and then that was starting to happen, that addiction is just like you put in the work, and it's you that put in the work. Obviously, somebody else writes the words and they film it, but it's something that I did that they liked, that they want to incorporate into their project. So to me, that gets my adrenaline flowing, knowing that something that I did on my own, with all the knowledge I gained in classes and stuff like that, once I put all that to use in a character that basically I came up with, because sometimes you have to pull a backstory or something like that in thin air. So that's where the addiction comes from. It's just, to me, bottom line, it's fun. I love doing it. And like I said,
what was that first role? What was that extra role? What movie?
Well, I've done like student films and some independents and stuff like that. But in 2009, I auditioned for The Town, and I got an extra role in The Town. So that's what, The Town, you can't get any bigger than that.
And that's what got you. That's what got you.
Exactly.
Okay, now you have to tell me. Now we have to get to the Affleck story. And you have some very good credentials, RIPD, Widow's Bay, and I just spaced on, God.
Julia was the last.
Julia, and American Fiction.
Yep.
American Fiction. So the in Julia, where you played the cameraman, that was also a big role for you. So let's talk about, give us the whole backstory in The Town.
Well, like I said, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were what got me, got the fire going. When I was in college, a friend of mine was a senior. I was a freshman. Make a long story short, she came up to take me out to dinner and go to a movie or whatever, just to hang out. And when we went to see The Rainmaker, which stars Matt Damon, and before the movie, they showed the previews for Good Will Hunting. And she said, "This is my friend's movie that they were writing that I told you about." She had never told me her friends were Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. So,
by the way.
Exactly. So knowing that someone knew them and they came from kind of, the people that I knew that they did that, I was kind of like, well, that's amazing. And then I read the whole thing about Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, and that's what kind of got me going, saying, let me get into this. And I kind of ended up, Carolyn Pickman was the one who cast Good Will Hunting. So I was taking classes at her, with her casting agency. I'd auditioned for her and stuff like that. So that kind of, got the adrenaline going again. And so in 2009, there was an open call, and you just went in, you read some lines, and they recorded you. I think they were looking for that authentic Boston accent. And I got a call back, and they gave me some sides to read. I went in, still didn't really know what it was for. And I thought I was just going in to, put down some lines on tape. And when I get in there, it was Ben Affleck who was behind the camera. So it's just him and I. So right there, it's like, all right, this is why I get into it. And here he is. And I read my lines. It was only 2 lines. It was a prison guard. And he just said, go ahead, recorded it, said, all right, thanks for coming. Did it, walked out. And then I got a call back. And she said, you got a call back. The director wants you to read for a different part. I said, all right, great. And that part was a money courier, like an armored car guard. And I went in.
Right.
And you come in, and Carolyn's behind the table, Ben Affleck, some of the other producers, and kid behind the camera, and Ben's going over my resume and pictures and all that stuff. And after I had seen Good Will Hunting, it was one of the best movies I had ever seen, and the fact that it was shot mostly around here shot and starring and written by 2 guys from Massachusetts. I thought it was the best thing I ever seen, so I took that ticket stub and I kept it in my wallet to kind of remind me why I started going after being an actor. And here I am in front of Ben Affleck, so I said, now or never. So he was looking at my pictures and Mike, you have a smile. Because in my pictures, I don't really smile. I just have that deadpan
Right.
look. The guy behind the camera is like, oh, he's smiling now. And I said, well, that's because I'm in front of this guy. And Ben's like, oh, come on, Mike, pour it on. So I reached into my wallet and I said, you're one of two reasons why I get into acting. And I pulled out the ticket stub. I said, the moment I saw Good Will Hunting, I decided I wanted to be an actor. And I showed him the ticket stub. And he's like, how the hell am I not supposed to hire you now?
I
And I said,
know.
well,
I know.
I said, you'll make the right decision. If I'm right, you'll hire me. If I'm not, it's a business. So we went, we did the scene. And then after I did one take, he was giving me notes, but I didn't hear a word he said because I was too starstruck. So I did it again, and I could tell by his reaction that I didn't get the part.
Didn't work. Yeah.
He shook my hand, thanked me for coming in, and I emailed Carolyn that night and just said, I apologize for the whole ticket stub thing. I would never do that to anyone except him or Matt Damon, of course. So she said, don't worry about it. I thought it was sweet. He liked you. He's going to give you a part. We just don't know which one yet. So months went by and I didn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden I get a call. You have to show up on set in Charlestown on Tuesday. And I didn't get the part I auditioned for, but he just put my character in the scene. It wasn't originally in the scene. Right. So they just added an armored car guard. So I showed up on set and, I had my own trailer, went to the makeup chair, all that stuff. And when I walked on set, Ben was talking to the DP and a couple other people, and he saw me walk in. He walked over, gave me a big hug, kind of looked around, said, what do you think? And like, to me right there, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm in a Ben Affleck movie. Hopefully I make the movie or whatever, but then I'm not even thinking about that. So we shot for 2 days. The movie came out. The premiere was at Fenway Park. I got to go to the premiere with everybody else, and it was just an amazing experience. So that is what started me going. And I didn't get cast in anything else for almost another 8 years after that.
It's hard. But people don't realize that. Yeah. That's why I call it, my friend Allison, it's an addiction. You have to be addicted to put up with the rejection, which everybody goes through. It doesn't matter what level you're at. Everybody goes through it one way or another. I love hearing stories like that because, for a guy like Ben Affleck, he didn't have to do that. He obviously remembers what it's like to be in your shoes. He appreciated the fact that you were a big fan of the movie. You're a local guy. He put you in. It's always good to hear stories like that. It really is. But
and not to cut you off, Gary, but the other part of that too was he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to give me my own trailer. I was literally an extra. He didn't have to bump me up my contract. So that contract allowed me to get my SAG card. Like I said, I'm just an extra, but he bumped me up in pay, gave me a trailer, and I got my SAG card out of it. Didn't have to do any of that. So I was grateful that he did that. And like I said, that's what kept me going. And obviously it kept me going for 8 years. But yeah, that's a side of where the addiction comes from, is stuff like that.
It's interesting because I know you as a person. You're not a person as an individual. You're not a look at me guy. Like, you don't go into a room and have to be the center of attention. You're very polite. You're very likable. But yet you're an actor. I find that, well, I don't find it interesting because I've met a lot of introverts who are actors. But it is fascinating how you're a regular guy. You're a regular guy. But yet you can go into a set, dress as a detective, do a whole scene, emote. What do you think that's all about?
I don't know. I just, a lot of the guys I play are just blue collar guys.
Right. But like, for you personally, like, you don't need, like, I don't think you do it for the attention. I think you do it because you love to do it.
I love to do it. And along the way, I met a lot of people that told me I couldn't do it. Like, why am I even bother trying? That'll never happen. So that's another side of the addiction, is where, there's a few people I went to college with that moved out to LA to become actors, and, it didn't work out for them. I just got lucky that I got into it and stayed here. and the business picked up
Right.
here. And I would
Timing.
tell people, I would leave on my lunch break from work and drive that 15 minutes into Boston to do an audition, and then come back before my boss even knew I was gone. And people were like,
Right.
"Why do you do that?" And be like, "Cause they're auditioning. I'd love to be in the film or the TV show, and that's what I want to do. If it happens, great. If not, I still have my full-time job if I balance things right,
Right.
and I can still do this." And it worked out that way. So um, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the role is. You can play audition for anything. A lot of people say that you're it's always you're typecast as cops or this or that, and it doesn't matter to me. It's still allowing me to meet these people and be a part of these projects. And if that's what fits for them to put me in their project, then I'll play a cop for the rest of my life. There's
Yeah.
nothing
You're
wrong.
very humble. You're very humble for an actor. So the well, you're very Mike. You're a very humble guy. I find it fascinating, and I also think it's why you get a lot of work. I think you come across as a humble guy, and if people are watching this, I think you can learn from Mike's auditioning. I think you are, as an actor, I think you are a perfect example of less is more. Like I
Yeah.
don't think like the roles that you've had, and when I've seen you work, I think, and this is a compliment. Like I think you kind of keep it simple. You just come
Yeah.
off as very real.
Yeah. That's what I've been told more than once that you just even on Widow's Bay, the Katie Dippold, the woman who created Widow's Bay, she said you were funny in this episode, and you were very real in this one. And I hear that a lot, saying very real, because I mean I just kind of play
I
to
don't see you acting. How do you do it? I don't see you acting. How do you do that?
I whatever the scene is, I try to put myself in that situation and how I would react in that situation. Some people wouldn't do that. They'd say, I want to act, I want to pretend I'm doing this or doing that. That may come up for me at some point. Maybe that's why there's certain roles I haven't gotten. But when I get the sides for something I'm auditioning for, I immediately try to look at it as, what would I do in this situation? If I was this person in that job, what would I do in that situation? And I try to keep it simple, because most of the parts that I audition for aren't, look at me over here, aren't the big,
Right, right.
not the big plot twist or that or this or that. It's, hey, this guy needs to move the story along, and he needs to get out these 2 or 3 words so the main character can get from here to here. That's all I'm there for. Whether or not that changes, that's up to me. If I can get bigger roles and stuff like that,
Well, I
great.
would, yeah, but I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change it. I think because Mike,
Oh,
look at your. I mean, Widow's Bay, Julia. You worked with Alexander Payne in the Holdovers and Cord Jefferson. So I think that I wouldn't change it. I just think that you have to, in order to get a bigger role, you have to audition in New York, or you have to kind of get lucky.
yeah,
Where where you may get. Because a lot of the times they come to Boston, they're looking for under 5 line people. They've got all
yeah.
the major roles filled, and they just want to fill in, day players, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't change your style. I mean, because I
Oh no,
think
I
it could work.
definitely.
It
They
could
just
work
there
anywhere.
may, yeah, there may be a role that calls for me to do something like that, but if that comes along, great. But I'm not looking to become famous. I'm looking to make enough money at this job to be able to be comfortable in life, to do something I love doing. You know what they always say? They say, if you work a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. So
True.
I
Yeah.
think I'm grateful and I'm lucky enough to be able to still hold down a full-time job, yet, and I still say, do this on the side. It took me the longest time to say to people that I'm a professional actor, because I've been in some really good projects, some decent projects, some huge projects, and I'm a part of that. And there'll be people that I, interact with every day, whether it's at work or public or whatever, that, they say, "Oh, you think you're an actor?" No, I'm a professional actor. I get paid to act, and my name is in the
Right.
credits. I'm in the project. So I'm happy to be able to do that because when I first started out, I just wanted to be in a movie. Then once I did the
Right.
town and saw what it felt like, I'm like, now I want a line in a movie. So I worked at that. I, studied more. I uh made my own self tapes. I read, I took classes, and I tried to make myself better, and I got a line in a movie, and then got on a TV show, got on multiple episodes of a TV show.
Right.
So the further I go, the higher I want to keep going. Um,
You want to keep advancing. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, if I can get an agent and branch out to New York or LA or Atlanta or wherever, great. But is that a deal breaker if I don't do that? No. I can still stay here and I've been lucky enough to get the parts that I've gotten.
Right.
And
Well, and you have soccer to coach, Mike.
I have a lot of things
Yeah,
to
you get a
do.
lot of things. I mean, that's the thing. That's the balancing. You still want to have your family. You want to. That's why a lot of people don't go to New York or LA.
Yeah.
Because they have kids to raise and they like the quality of life here. Yeah, I totally get it. So, Alexander Payne, tell us about that experience on the Holdovers.
I got I think I auditioned for a couple parts for that. But obviously after COVID, everything was self tapes. There weren't any in person auditions. I
Right.
think it was a good 3 years when I ended up getting a call back for the holdovers that I actually went in and met Alexander Payne. But I recorded the audition, I sent it in, and I was actually at work. I work for a private school on the South Shore, and I don't know, blowing leaves or cutting grass or something, and I behind one of the buildings I look up and Alexander Payne's up in the doorway. And I've never seen him in person, and I probably haven't seen a video or picture of him in 10, 15 years. So I'm like, that guy looks like Alexander Payne. So about 10 minutes later, an email saying you have a director's callback with Alexander Payne tomorrow for the holdovers. So I immediately go back to the building to see if he's there. He had already left. So the next day I went in and I had to read for him, and I met him in person, and um, the guy I play was a Christmas tree salesman, but he's just, a blue collar guy that
Right.
um, was working with the school that's featured in the movie. So I was literally dressed how I dressed for the
For
audition. That was
work.
just I
Ah, right.
literally left work, went in, didn't change a thing I was wearing, and I read for him. And someone had mentioned to him that I worked at the school he was just at and missed him by about 30 seconds. And he just thanked me for coming in, and he said, we'll be in touch or we won't be in touch. And then I think it was a couple of weeks went by or something like that, and I get a phone call, New York number on my phone, and I said hello, and he said, "Hello, is this Mr. Bad Dress?" Which, if you take my last name, Malvesti, and I believe in Spanish it means bad dress. So I laughed because there's people that have said that before, that with about my last name, and I knew it wasn't a telemarketer or anything like that, obviously. So he said, "This is Mr. Alexander Payne," and I was like, what director calls
I know. Yeah.
under five liner? And he says, "I just wanted to welcome you aboard. I want you to be a part of the movie. Thanks for auditioning. You now have my number. Now we're working together. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any complaints, anything, just reach out, let me know." And I was completely blown away by that. And it was an amazing experience working on the film with
Yeah.
him.
He's one of my favorite directors. I wish he would do a series.
Yeah,
I always, as I watched the holdovers, I wish it had been 10 episodes or eight
yeah.
episodes because there was so much there.
It was
You
actually
know,
originally supposed to be a television show, and
yeah,
I
I
think
think.
did a movie instead.
Well, maybe he felt that he wanted to do a movie, but it would have been a great television show because
Yeah,
there was a lot to chew on. So
yep,
Julia, another terrific opportunity for you.
yeah. That one, I think I auditioned for a few roles for that, and as usual, I went in for Lisa Lobel at Boston Casting, who I want to say 90% of the things I've been in, she's been the one to cast me. So,
Yeah.
absolutely grateful. Her and Melissa they have confidence in me, and they're always getting me in the room for whatever it might be. And that's what I was talking about earlier with the relationships I started by just taking classes and showing them I can consistently be there and be dependable and stuff like that. So I'm grateful that they always have me back in the room. So I read for that, and they called me and they said they want you to play Benny, Julia's head cameraman. And so I had questions, how many shooting dates, when does it start, this and that. And they said, every time Julia is filming her show, you are going to be front and center. And to me, the whole show is about her cooking show. So that was an unbelievable experience too. For 2 seasons, I was in a total of 12 episodes. And the cast I got to work with, just BB Newworth and Fran Kranz, just some of the people that I watched growing up. Sure. David Hyde Pierce and BB Newworth. I just having a relationship with them and talking with them outside of the show and getting to go to dinner with them and things like that. And just to watch them work. And Sarah Lancashire, she's incredible. I don't know why she's not a household name in the States.
Right.
But she played Julia, and she was unbelievable. And just watching her work every day that I was on set was like a masterclass. I know that's cliche, but I mean,
well, what is it, Mike? Let's go back. Like it's Giamatti, Affleck. You just mentioned Baby Newworth, David Hyde Pierce, Widow's Bay, obviously, with that crew. What is the consistent theme you see with all these heavy hitters? And I don't necessarily, I'm not talking about stars. I'm talking about really great actors that do great work all the time. What is a consistent theme that you see?
Most of them that I work with have been doing it for a long time, and they just put in the effort. Some of the ones you mentioned, they're not the big flashy movie stars and things like that. They just consistently work on their craft. And I wish I had a story about someone who was, a complete jerk on set, but I've never had that experience.
Right.
They've always been, and I don't go and force myself and, try to have a conversation, whatever. I just let it happen.
Or ask for a picture.
Yeah. That'll do. I don't mind doing that sometimes. Only if I've been on set with them for a while. But I want to be a pro. What's that?
You want to be a pro.
Yeah, exactly. It's not my main focus. If it organically comes up, I will do it. I've actually had a couple people I've worked with say, "Hey, let's get a picture," and I haven't had to ask them. But I mean, if it comes up organically, great. But people like that, David Hyde, just Julia, just because there was so many people on that set that they were just unbelievable actors, and they were the nicest people. And some of them would come in for 1 or 2 days, and they would be off book. They wouldn't flub up their lines. They'd know where their blocking was. They would come in, they'd be prepared, completely professional, but also be able to have fun. And in Julia, I forget how many total directors there were, but there were a lot of directors on that series, and they were all great. Everyone came in, knew what their job was. The crews around here are unbelievable. And it's because, filmmaking and TV is the ultimate team experience. If one person's lagging, then it affects everything. So I've just been lucky to get some of the projects I've gotten, and believe me, it's not lost on me. I'm grateful, and I'll say I'm lucky.
And also, but you're also good. I think that what people don't see when you mention the preparations, they put in the work. They sit in their room and they read, They memorize, they memorize, they memorize, they memorize, they memorize, they memorize. I mean, I saw this
Yeah.
clip, a Peter O'Toole clip.
Hmm.
He says, you got to go in a room with nobody else for hours, and you just got to do it again and
Yeah.
again and again and again. And that's what they do. Now, I think, like I've heard some actors say they need to read it out loud
Yeah.
1,000 times. I mean, excuse me, Anthony Hopkins says he reads the script 300 times
Yeah.
or
Yep.
250 times, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But there's no shortcut. So when you see the end result of what those people have done, they weren't out partying, they weren't out in limos, they were in a room, and they were going with line after line after line. Now, as you get to know the character, and as I'm sure you know the direction of the character and who they are, it's probably easy to memorize,
Yeah.
but it's still, you got to put in the work. I mean, it's just,
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Let's talk about, like, is it Matthew Rice or is it Reese?
Reese.
Reese
Yeah.
from Widow's Bed. And then, so working with him, and did you get to work with Stephen Root at all?
I wasn't in any scenes with him, but we shot a couple of days on the same day. So we sat in the holding area together.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I'm grateful for too, is the downtime in between.
I heard he's great.
He was one of the nicest people I've ever met. And we didn't have any scenes together. So we just kind of sat and talked. And he was one of the people where I knew I was rapping. I wasn't sure if I was going to see him again.
Right.
On set or not. And I just told him what a big fan I was, because I specifically remember, I know I've watched him on TV growing up in movies, and sometimes you don't even know it's him because he's one of the best character actors. Well, that's what I was going to say. In 1999, I went to see Office Space, the first showing, the first day it came out. And I love that movie. I thought he was hilarious in it. So I talked to him about it. And we talked about a couple other things, him working with the Coen brothers. I loved him on the show Barry. And we talked about Bill Hader and working on that show. And then, after, him going on set, me going on set, going back and forth, they come in, tell me I'm wrapped. And I went to stand up and I shook his hand. I said, thanks for hanging out. And he goes, hey, let's get that picture. And I said, are you sure? He said, yeah, come on, let's get a picture. So we took a picture and he was great, checked it, made sure it was okay. And he's like, it was great. And I appreciated him for that. I mean, I may have asked for one, but it wasn't on my mind because I just
he works all the time. He works all the time. The guy is in everything, and he's a Shakespearean trained actor. What he did originally was he traveled around the country doing Shakespeare for high schools.
Yeah. Yeah. He's incredible. And I could only dream of having a fraction of the career he has. And the great thing about Widow's Bay was Matthew Reese, who is still, I think they're finally realizing now, obviously he's nominated for 2 Emmys in 2 different categories, lead actor, but he was one of the nicest people I've worked with. And Kate O'Flynn, who kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't know much about her when I met her on set, but I can't believe how phenomenal she is on Widow's Bay. And she's nominated for an Emmy. And then Stephen Root in there. Also Jeff Hiller, who was in a show called Somebody Somewhere. When we were on set, he got nominated for an Emmy for that show. And he was up against people like Harrison Ford. And he won the Emmy. Which I talked to him, and Jeff still considers himself, an up and coming actor. Because when I was talking to him, actors like us, I'm like, what do you mean like me? I'm like, you've been doing this for 20 years, and he's taught improv. He wrote a book, which is phenomenal. And when I booked Widow's Bay, I knew Matthew Reese was the star of it, but I knew nothing else. So when I walk in and I see Jeff Hiller sitting there, and I'm like, oh, I loved you on the show Somebody Somewhere on HBO. I thought you were phenomenal. And then I meet Kate O'Flynn, and then I'm talking to Kate O'Flynn, and I'm like, who else is on this show? And she's like, Stephen Root. And I said, he's on this? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, she goes, you should meet him. He's one of the nicest people. And I said, I don't want to meet him because they say don't meet your heroes. You'll be disappointed.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, I don't know if I want to meet him. I'll say hello or whatever. And then 2 seconds later, I get a tap on the back. And he said, sorry, too late. And he said, hi, I'm Steven. and he came over, shook my hand, and that's when we kind of hit it off there. And then, in between scenes, we sat there, but I didn't know what the show was about. I didn't know
Yeah.
who was. I knew who created it, and I love Katie Dippold's work. She wrote for Parks and Rec. She wrote the movie The Heat with Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy that was shot
Melissa
here.
McCarthy shot here in Boston.
Yep, and I love that's one of my favorite comedies. It has some great scenes in there that I love, and I also love Parks and Rec. And the one the Hiro Morai, he directed a couple of the episodes that I was in, and he's a phenomenal director, and he's a great producer that's produced some great television. He did some amazing music videos as well. So it's one of those things where now that I've seen the show and I've seen everybody's work, I kind of I want to go back now and talk to people about, talk to Kate O'Flynn about her acting and her choices and this and that, and talk to Steven about his, and that's what kind of keeps you going. But yeah, that was I ended up being lucky enough to be in 3 episodes of Widow's Bay, and I can't believe
it's just hard work, man. These people, they work their ass off.
Yeah.
They just work. That's like Reese. I mean, Perry Mason was what, 2 seasons? I think so. I thought he was great in it. The show got a little weird in the 2nd season. The writing got a little, I don't know. The 1st season was great. Great. Yeah. And he's great. I mean, I never watched The Americans, but like that's where he made his, his bones.
I had heard about the Beast. I think the Beast in Me, the Beast Inside. I had heard about it before I shot Widow's Bay. I didn't get the chance to watch it till after. I wish I had seen it before, because boy, did I have questions about that. But seeing him, Matthew, in Widow's Bay, and then seeing him in The Beast in Me, talk about 2 completely different characters.
Oh yeah,
and phenomenal in both of them. And it's like that's the kind of stuff that keeps me going, to get to work with those kind of people. And when you're on set, it makes you want to pick their brain. And obviously, like I said, if it happens organically, great. But I'm not going to sit there and pester them. But if it comes up, great. I want to use that opportunity to ask them questions to try and make myself better, try and better my career, or whatever I can call it.
What's the one thing, as we wrap it up, Mike, what is the one thing you've taken from these people that you've met and worked with? Is there one element?
Like you touched on before, just the work ethic. These people, I mean, what they do, they study. And I when I work with someone, if I'm not sure who they are, I like to read as much about them as I can to kind of see where they came from. I mean, when I first started doing stuff, I would do that to see where people came from and how they got to where they are now. Like if I had shows like yours when I was first starting out, it's just unbelievable information to have, because I didn't have it back then when I started. I used to follow actors like Kevin Chapman and Tom Kemp, because they were local guys who I would see in huge movies. And I wanted to know, how did you get from there to where you are? And if I get the chance to, like Tom Kemp, I got the chance to bump into him years ago, probably 10, 15, maybe even more than that. I stopped him one day. I asked him, I said, "Are you Tom Kemp?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "My name's Mike. I'm studying to be an actor. I just wanted to say hello." And I had questions, and he sat and had a conversation with me for about 15 minutes and told me that sometimes he teaches classes and what classes I should look out for. And I ended up taking some of the classes. I ended up taking 2 classes with him, which I took a lot from. And, cut to when the strike happened, I had gone to a location where we were doing, where we had to get together with some of the union people. We did a march on the Boston Common, and he came up to me after I had done Julia and a couple of movies. And he just came up to me and gave me a big hug and said, "Hey," he goes, "here you are." He goes, "I remember you coming up to me 10, 15 years ago wanting to know how to get it." And it was kind of like a full circle thing. But, working with the people I work with now, I just want to know how they got to where they are, if I have the chance to ask them whatever
Right.
question it is, like you were talking about people's how they study their lines,
How they work.
their characters. If I get the chance to ask them that stuff, great. But if you just sit
Sometimes they
back,
don't want to tell you because I'm completely name dropping. But when we did uh, the show in Providence, Ellen McKay, I was with Jamie Lee Curtis and Albert Brooks for a week, and I talked to Jamie Lee Curtis a lot, and I wanted to talk about the bear, and she took me all through the bear. She was wonderful. Told me all
yeah,
about how they shot everything everywhere all at once, and I said, the bear, that's heavy stuff. So I'm like, how did you prepare? What's your method? And she was just like, eh. So she wasn't going there. Some people
yeah,
don't want to talk about it,
yeah.
and I
Well,
go, okay,
also,
that's cool.
the thing I realized too is if they don't want to talk about it, I can't take it personally because
Oh,
every
no,
time
it's very
that,
private. Oh, it's very
exactly,
private.
or there's also when they're on set, you're with them for whatever time period you're with them. And then when they move on, there's always going to be somebody else that asks them the same question. So it just may be the timing, whether or not they're willing to talk about it, or if they like
They
to
don't
talk
want to
about
talk
it at
about
all.
it.
So if I'm lucky enough to sit down and have a conversation with someone, I'll just let it go. When I worked on the Boston Strangler, I got to sit in an apartment living room with Carrie Coon
Oh,
for
she's
hours
crazy.
while we were filming, and we just had a great conversation. And I never even thought to ask her about her process. We just talked about life, our kids, and a little bit about politics and stuff like that. And if it happens, it happens. Great. If not,
And Keira Knightley was on that too.
yeah, exactly. I didn't really get to talk with her as much because I think she was filming 99% of the time when
Yeah.
I was on set, so there was really no downtime for her. But the one thing I try to do the most is just sit, keep my mouth shut, and pay attention to what's going on around me, keep my
Right.
ears and eyes open, and learn that way. Learn what to do, learn what not to do. And that you're always going to learn that lesson because you always have the person who's going to go a step further than they should. And you kind of learn, not to do that. Just read the way the people are, the way the
And
crew is.
I think because of your professionalism, Mike, I think you get a lot of work. I just think, they know you do a great job and they like you and they want to work with you. The one thing that I'm like, I also, the word that I'm dealing with is fearlessness, because even when I had a chance, I was watching Albert Brooks, he was trying everything. I mean, he tried this, he tried that, he tried that. They don't care.
Yeah,
And of course, he's Albert Brooks. He can do what he wants.
absolutely.
But, let's try this, let's try that, let's try that, let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Do this, do this, do this. I think you can't. I tell my son the same thing in sports and my kids in sports. You can't be afraid to fail.
Oh,
Sometimes you just got to take a swing. You know what I
yeah.
mean? You just got to you got to take a swing.
And
I've done it, and maybe like I did it once. I did it once. I took a swing on a line, and I just had like two lines, and uh, do it again. I think, but you got to get into a position where they will afford you that benefit.
yeah. Well, when I worked on the Holdovers, um, the first scene I shot was just a couple of lines of us carrying out a Christmas tree, and I added a line at the end because it came to me as I was walking, and
Yeah.
I kind of got halfway past the camera and just blurted out a line about the kid leaning on the truck. I said, "Get off my truck," or something like that. And Alexander Payne yelled, "Cut!" And then he said, "Did you get that?" And the DP was like, "No." And he goes, "All right." He goes, "Bring it back." And he goes, "But say that line before you get to this point." And
Right.
I
Right.
said it just because it kind of came to me in the scene. I was already past and the scene was already done. It didn't make the movie, but the script supervisor came over and she was writing something down. She said, "Congratulations, you happened to get a line into an Alexander Payne film." And she goes, "You
Yeah,
probably
that
don't
never
know how
happens.
huge that is." And I kind of, it's just something that happened organically. I didn't throw it in there to try and get a line in a movie. It just kind of happened because I said it because I felt it at that moment, but I was already kind of past the camera. So it was just kind of a little one-off. It didn't make the movie, but it still felt good to be able to do that and not have him say, just say the lines or anything like that.
Well, sometimes you just got to take a swing. You just do. I mean, it happened. You were comfortable. You were in the moment. You ran with it. Awesome. Michael, this one is definitely going to make air or be online or whatever. I won't lose this one, but I'm glad we talked because of the success that you've had recently, with Widow's Bay. Just talk about that. I mean, the show, it's like the most popular show out there.
No, I can't believe 19 Emmy nominations. I wouldn't have thought that. Everybody on that show was amazing. The crew was amazing. The cast is amazing. I knew nothing about it. I only got my lines when I showed up on set.
Yeah.
Like I said, I didn't know who was in it at the time. And when I showed up into holding to get ready to film, that's when I found out who was in the show. So it kind of all happened quick. And it was July of last year that we shot. And it was fun. And most of the time I like to be able to read what I'm filming to kind of know what's going on, but they gave me enough to work with what I had, or just for me, just to keep it simple and get the lines out there. So I don't need to know those plot points. But it was fun to be able to watch all 10 episodes of this show and genuinely not knowing what the hell was going on and getting it to enjoy it with everybody else. I'm glad it got, picked up for a season 2. And I'll say it again. I just can't believe it got, I can believe it, but it's unbelievable that it got 19 Emmy nominations. So I'm excited to see what happens with that. It's all right. I can't believe the reaction that it's gotten.
Get out the tux. Michael Malvesti, if you want a hit show, put Malvey in it. Widow's Bay, Julia, The Holdovers. And I just spaced it. What was the Court Jefferson movie?
American Fiction.
American Fiction. If you want a hit, get Malvey. Michael, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Gary.